If we can start finding our way to the seats, that would be a kindness to ourselves, myself, and the lecturer. I am sure. I've been here 30 seconds and already tripped over one word. This is not bidding very well. Forward, forward. It's just like in church. Don't take the outside seats. Move over to the middle of the pew. David, are you going to behave yourself? That's what I was afraid of. We used to take roll at these events. I'm going to suggest to the dean that we reinstate that practice because I don't think I'm seeing a very large majority of the student body here yet. I realize the distractions are many. It's springtime, and we have exactly 1 week left in our class load. But what better way to end the semester and launch into summertime than with an invigorating lecture? Do not laugh. The lecturer is standing right there. All right, welcome one and all to our last lecture of the current cycle. I want to say just a few words, a few by my measure anyhow, which will sound like an interminable amount to some of you. From the beginning of Wyoming Catholic College, now 19 years ago, we have had firmly in view an integrated and holistic conception of education, which is involved in forming the whole person, and in so doing touches upon many different disciplines, some more thoroughgoingly than others. There's a rhyme and a reason to what we're doing and to how we do it. It's not just that we want to, in a sort of frenzy, reach out and touch as many different disciplines as possible. Rather, we want to look at a holistic, if I may use that word again, survey of the disciplines that comprise the totality of our encounter with the world. The idea being to embrace all of reality and become better persons in so doing. It's not just what we cover in our program, but how we cover it. There's an order and a method. There's a beginning, a middle, and a goal point. And this is dictated not arbitrarily, but by the nature of human knowing. We want to begin where the human being begins in the quest for knowledge, which is a pursuit of the trajectory of wonder, hopefully leading to wisdom. Sorry, I'm manifesting technological incompetence with this thing. I have to apparently be within 14 millimeters of it for it to actually work. I could probably do all right without. The basic idea that governs our approach to knowledge and learning is to start where humans start, with the senses, with observing, with just taking in the world in which we find ourselves, observing it, and only later proceeding to imagine and remember and organize our experiences with it in mind, that we might make some sense of them all. That is to say, that we might come to understand them more philosophically and ultimately theologically. But it's very important to begin at the beginning, and so we have valued from the beginning of our experiment here encounter with nature, the recitation and memorization of poetry, which is a kind of filtered experience of nature, You knew this was coming. Flower in the crannied wall. We don't know that one? Somebody told me we knew that one. I'm embarrassed. But not too much, because it's just a poem. It's a cool poem about nature. So, getting on the back of a horse is part of this experience. Obviously, our outdoor trips, starting with the 21 days, very important part of it. But we want to begin with nature. Immerse ourselves in nature even before we attend too much to the works of man, which are built on the works of nature. And in our approach to nature, we can identify three phases that all of which we cover to some degree here. There is natural history, there is natural philosophy, and there is natural science. Natural history, as the word history implies, is an encounter with the particulars, just nature in the raw, just opening ourselves to it and looking at it without prejudice in a sort of a naivete that's not childish, but receptive, waiting to be informed. Later on, we dwell upon philosophical principles that tie all of nature together, and only later still do we, on the basis of some mathematical knowledge, get a glimpse at how natural scientists proceed with their analytical and statistical methods. So, regarding the first of those, natural history, we don't want to be entirely random and chaotic and undisciplined in our approach. We want to be intentional, and we want it to be a somewhat guided and experience. In an ideal world, your instructors would be able to offer such guidance and structure to the observations that we ask you to make. Unfortunately, the instructor pool includes people such as me, so that's not quite enough. We have to rely on guides for the guides, and those, more often than not, are found in the form of books that have been written. This evening we have the rare opportunity to encounter and listen to one of the authors of a book that we use in our curriculum, a guide to the observing of nature. Daniel Mathews graces us with his presence. He drove over here from Portland, where he has lived for decades, writing books that have garnered very widespread acclaim, mostly on the natural history of the Northern Rockies and the Northern Cascades. That's the volcanic range to the west of the Rockies. He is turning this into quite an epic adventure. As soon as he's done with us, he's going to spend 11 days camping in these parts. And so we wish him well in that adventure, hoping for little snow and lots of sun, if that's his thing. Anyhow, I don't think I have to say anything more about his qualifications, because I believe that he will give you some glimpse into the sorts of books he has been writing and the experiences which have led him to write these books. I would like you all to join me in giving a warm welcome to Mr. Daniel Mathews.
Is it on now? Yes. Very good. So yeah, I drove 975 miles to be here tonight, and it was at least 700 miles of staggering beauty of God's green earth. The cottonwoods in their inimitable yellow-green, just getting going, the grasses on the slopes, contrasting with the sagebrush. We've got to take really good care of it. And I'm really happy to be here tonight talking to a student body of a college that has such an amazing focus on the outdoors and on nature. So, get started. And I realize now that you probably know a lot of what I was going to say first, which is where we are. So forgive me if you do. We're at the confluence of the North and Middle Forks of the Popogi River, where they emerge from the Wind River Range, which is the highest mountain range in Wyoming, not only in Wyoming, but in all the Rockies, including even Canada, except for Colorado. But the winds beat even Colorado when it comes to glaciers. They beat even Glacier National Park in all of Montana as well. Let's see. Oh, pointing in the wrong direction. No? Haley? Oh. Oh, that one.
You try on and off, try again.
You turned it on for me. So I do point that way, right?
Yes. Oh no, the batteries die. Here. Just give me a thumbs up and I'll click it for you. Whenever you want to click a second.
Okay, oh,
I got you up there.
okay. Okay, as soon as you get there, click one. So the wind rivers are very peaky in places, and in other places, they're almost flat. They have these huge areas called summit flats, which is kind of interesting and puzzling. Why would the mountains be so flat at 11,500 feet and then rise up to 13,800 in their peaked parts a little bit farther to the west? And for a long time, everyone seemed to think that it was about the entire area, even though they knew it had been raised first 50 to 60 million years ago. They thought that maybe it had all been worn down to being basically a plain like the Great Plains, and then raised again and then carved by glaciers. But there is a better explanation. Okay, there are some of the peaked mountains and the biggest glacier. There's more peaked mountains. I'll bet a lot of you guys recognize that one. And there's one of the flats. And here's the paper that explained how it got so flat. The flats are punctuated by tors, which are these little outcroppings of bedrock that tend to occur where there had been the highest peaks before it all got worn down. But it didn't get worn down to a flat plain. It just got worn down to what it is now. And it took a long time to do even that. So according to this theory, the mountains were never really low between 50 million years ago and now. Not too many people, you may still run across interpretive signs with the theory about all being a plain and then raised again. But like a geologist, a geophysicist named Gene Humphreys, who consulted with me on all my geology chapters, I showed him this paper and he said, whoa, that's really different from what they taught me in college. But he said, Bob Anderson's a really careful geologist, so I'm going to believe him. So yeah, Anderson found that frost-related breakdown, which we always knew is what goes on in areas where the temperature fluctuates between above freezing and below freezing a whole lot of times every year, that frost arriving and related breakdown of bedrock can gradually wear down to this arcuate, very gentle, sloping flat with sharp edges where it drops into the river valleys. And lightning helps too. Lightning can actually bust up some of those tors and rocks and cast their boulders a short distance away. And if you add up enough lightning bolts over a period of time, that's significant. The Wind Rivers are a laramide thrust fault range, which is typical of several of the major ranges in Colorado, Wyoming, a little bit of Montana, a little bit of Utah. And they're kind of interesting because they bring such really, really deep rocks up to the surface. You can see it as the gray rocks in the picture. The little mountain ranges over at the western edge of Montana and the western edge of this diagram, the Salt River and Wyoming ranges, those are normal faults from an earlier orogeny or mountain building episode. And as you see, they don't bring so much of the really deep or basement rocks to the surface. And those basement rocks are mostly granitic and metamorphic rocks, and they're just gorgeous. I love them. It's a gneiss on the left and migmatite on the right. Where we are is also a point in time. This is the spring of 2026, which is the year with the least snowpack that has ever been measured in the U.S. West in the time that scientific instruments have been doing the measuring. The Wind River Range didn't get hit as hard as Colorado, everywhere to the south of here, and conversely, Montana was a little better off still. But still, while they had fairly close to normal snowpack through a lot of the year, they ended up, especially after the March heat wave, with way less. This is a map of snow tells, which are these remote measuring stations that they have a pad that snow lands on, and they continuously weigh the snow, and that tells its water content. And then they have a little radio, and they have solar panels that power the radio, and they send signals out constantly to NOAA, which compiles them all. So this was at the end of April, which is typically the time when snowpack is near its maximum for the year. And the red dots are all snow tells that had less than 50% of their norm for that time of year. This is the record, the cross-time record for the snow tell closest to Lander. It's at elevation 8720 feet. And as you see, if you can see the thin green line in the middle of the green band, that's the average over a 30-year period. So you see the average typically peaks around almost May 1st. This year, the black line was winning well below average, and then with the March heat wave, it tanked, and it reached 0 weeks before the previous record for earliest snow melt-off. And here's a little better one. It's the second closest to Lander, and it's at much higher elevation, 10,080 feet. And so it was actually running about normal until the March heat wave. And after the March heat wave, it dropped, but then you've had some snow since then, as you know. So it's not doing as badly. And here's the average for the entire upper Colorado basin, which includes the Green River Basin on the far side of the Wind River Range. And as you see, it's way below any previous year within this instrumental record. And that's bad news. Bad news for ranchers, bad news for forest fire smoke, bad news for fish, bad news for all of us. Because in the past, snowmelt was what would keep the rivers flowing and keep them full well into June and July. And was this really a drought year? Not really. What it was a warm winter. The darkest red color on there is all the counties that had their warmest winter on record. And then there was March. That was December through February, and here in March, the similar area got even bigger, and as you remember, more intense, and a lot of snow melted. But it didn't happen because there was no precipitation. Our basin, this is maps of basins, our basin is that one. So as of April 21st, it was at 59% of normal. Not too terrible, but the precipitation on the same date was at 102% of normal. So pretty much a normal year here for the basin as a whole. What happened was, because it was so much warmer, a lot of the precipitation that would have fallen as snow fell as rain instead, or if it did fall as snow, it had a chance to melt off pretty soon, some of it because there were all these warm spells in the middle of the winter. Moving on, Dr. Sabeda suggested that I say a few words on how I got here, aside from driving, how I became a natural history writer, though after hearing Stan's definitions, maybe I'm a natural science writer. In college, I took some courses, just a few courses in geology and botany, but overall, I got my degree in English. So I got out knowing that I had some writing skills, but having no clue as to anything I felt compelled to write. So naturally, I thought the thing to do then, this being 1970, yes, I'm that old, naturally I thought the thing to do was to build a cabin in the woods. So I drew up a sketch for an A-frame cabin, and I found a site that had western red cedar, small trees that I could cut and use for poles, and it had a big old log of long dead western red cedar that I bucked and split into cedar shakes. And I built my cabin, and then I made kind of a pathetic start at an artistic career, but that didn't last at all. So I started thinking about ice cream and how my town really needed more interesting ice cream flavors. The best that America could come up with back then was Baskin-Robbins. So I did some study on regulations and got a bit of equipment and talked to a couple landlords about possible ice cream shop spaces for rent. But I wasn't feeling really sure of myself, and one night there was a knock on the door, and a college classmate who I'd been on a great backpacking trip with was there, saying that he had decided to write a complete natural history of the mountains of Western Oregon and Washington. But as he got into it a tiny bit, he realized it was such an enormous project that he would need a co-author. So 2 days later, I was in. 2 months later, he was out. He went back to graduate school and became a geologist. Retired 25 years later, came back to Portland, and we co-authored a book called America from the Air, and I learned how painful it can be a co-author. It's hard for friendships. So yeah, I was on board after 2 days, and then I went and got my day job in a restaurant, and took a long time writing that first book. I ended up reading a whole lot of scientific papers, and getting into liking it and finding a lot of them amazing and even fun. So here's a research topic I've dived into over the last 2 months. What do you suppose these animals have in common? Any guesses? They all sense the Earth's magnetic field to do what they're doing. Birds, of course, do these long, long migrations, and forever natural history guys and ladies have been wondering how in the world do they navigate over these long migrations. And as early as 1855, people were talking about maybe they sensed the magnetic field, but that waited 100 years to be confirmed experimentally. And now it is not only for birds, but flatworms, butterflies, tortoises, lots and lots of parts of the animal kingdom have been shown to use magnetoreception. Salmon, of course, we know they go out to sea for 1 or 2 or 3 years and then find their way back to the exact little tributary they were hatched in. And as of 1970s, I think, it was pretty well established that they pick their stream by smell, basically, by sensing the chemistry in the water that is based on bedrock and soil and vegetation and fungi in the soil. And they follow that little thread of smell back to the right place. And they're not perfect. And it's a good thing they're not perfect, because when a stream is liberated, like from when dams are removed or even volcanic ash is removed that had been blocking salmon from a former salmon stream, there are strays that show up to re-inhabit those river drainages. But anyway, they're pretty good at it. But what about finding their way from the middle of the ocean to the river mouth? Surely no one believes that they can sense the chemistry way out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and follow a continuous thread of it back to the mouth of the Columbia or whatever. No way. Magnetoreception is the answer. What about foxes? And this is, hearing that foxes do it on those beautiful leaps they make is what got me so excited this spring. Foxes do this beautiful arcing leap to catch mice, even under 10 inches of snow or 10 inches of thick grass where they can't possibly see it. And of course they're using hearing. They have great big ears, they can rotate them, so they spend a while hearing the sound and zeroing in on it and getting a pretty good idea of where that mouse is. And then they pounce, leaping up into the air and then diving face first into the snow. And one scientist looked into whether their pointy faces are a big help at that, and yes, they are. Compared to a bulldog, a fox can dive into snow faster, deeper, and with less annoyance to the face than a bulldog. And that's why they have those foxy faces. But how are they using the magnetic field? So another scientist started watching the leaps of mousing foxes. He watched several hundred. He recorded exactly what direction they were leaping in and whether or not they caught their prey. And, I was going to talk about this part first. Okay, there are 4 aspects of the magnetic field that animals use. And the one we're familiar with that our compasses use, of course, is the direction, pointing toward magnetic north. The second one, called inclination, is the tilt, because the lines of magnetic force at the poles go straight down, and at the magnetic equators, they go straight horizontal, and at every point in between, they have a slightly different tilt, and from that, you can get a vague sense of how close you are to the north magnetic pole. The third aspect is intensity. The left-hand side of the diagram, the length of the arrows are proportional to the intensity of the magnetic force field. And that, of course, provides the exact same information, how close you are to the pole. So it's not likely that any one animal uses both of those. They would be redundant. But different animals use different ones. Then the fourth, which is the most amazing to me, is declination. That's the difference between magnetic north and true north. And to know where true north is, of course, have to know that the sun is true south at midday, and you have to have a clock to know when it's midday. And fortunately, it's been shown that birds have a very good internal clock, so they can use declination too. Let's see what comes up on the next slide. Not the right thing. Go back one. This is a grid of the Earth showing the sort of equivalent of latitude and longitude that a bird can get by combining magnetic intensity with magnetic declination. So it's not really precise, but it can be very useful for long distance navigation. So now, back one. There. This is the Fox direction study. You see the success rate north and south was 60 or 72%. In the other directions, it was between 0 and 18%. So not only is the fox preferring most of the time to leap in the direction of magnetic north or magnetic south, but it has good reason to do so because it's going to be more successful. So this is pretty clear proof that it's using magnetoreception. But how? And there's only been one paper written that tries to explain how, and it's kind of speculation, but he thinks that it provides a rangefinder, that the fox moves toward the mouse until where he thinks the mouse is, according to hearing, is congruent with the tilt of the magnetic field and where they're pointing down at the Earth. And then it pounces, and that slightly improves his accuracy enough to make a significant difference. What comes next? The big magnetoreception riddle of the last couple of decades has been exactly how and in what organ, what tissue the animals are doing this magnetoreception. And there are three main theories, and they're probably all true. And they're all too technical for me to go into now. The third, and actually the most technical because it uses quantum physics, so it's over my head, would place the location of the perception in the retina of the eye, where there are certain proteins which respond to light and then to magnetism, apparently. So if that's the case, then a fox might actually see the magnetic field kind of overlaid onto its visual field, since they're both hitting the retina. Okay, has anyone seen trees like this up in the mountains? They're kind of a mystery, so maybe one of you will figure it out. A couple of Swedes wrote a paper saying they thought, now the tendency is almost all trees in the northern hemisphere, in the northern temperate zone, twist to the right, like the tree on the left. Yeah. The one exception here is limber pine, which for some reason twists to the right. So that's a limber pine on the right. But these Swedes looked at that and the fact that the reverse is true in the southern hemisphere. So they said, well, in the north temperate zone, the prevailing wind direction is from the west, and the trees are growing more limbs on their south because they're reaching toward the sun. And the wind is blowing at those southern limbs and pushing them, and so the tree is kind of pushing back by twisting its crane. But then only a minority of trees are doing this, and I don't know, a lot of scientists don't really believe this theory, and one of them, a physiologist, so no, he doesn't think wind is part of it at all. It's just a mystery of tree physiology. Wood is insanely complicated. Our understanding of wood formation is limited. That's what he wrote. So, and leave it to you. Now, very different topic, a little glimpse of Wyoming future. Actually, those were shot in Wyoming's present. There are 27 of these turbines, 150 miles east of here. And it's an experiment to see whether painting one blade black will reduce the mortality of golden eagles and other birds. And we're very hopeful because there was a smaller scale study on an island off of Norway, which was already published, which had very good results in reducing bird mortality. And there are explanations of it which I can't really give, having to do with blurring of vision and just making it more visible. So fingers crossed that this is what most of the wind turbine farms will look like 20 years from now or sooner. And here's something not very scientific. A pretty flower. Everyone loves the Alpine forget-me-not. It's the official flower of Grand Teton National Park, and it holds the wildflower record for greatest intensity per millimeter of height. That's a pseudo-statistic that I made up and put in my books. Here's something sweet that a botanist explorer wrote about it in 1820 on Pikes Peak. May the deep cerulean tint of the sky be supposed to have an influence in producing the corresponding color so prevalent in the flowers of these plants? So those 19th century botanist explorers, a lot of their names turn up as the scientific names of plants and animals. So since I wanted in my books to explain a lot of those names, or as many as I could, got me into looking up these early natural history guys. And it was fun, it was interesting. In the 1850s and 1860s, the US Army sent several expeditions to explore and map the West. And most of these expeditions included at least one scientist. Geologist John Strong Newberry picked the type specimen of the wildflower genus Ivesea while running the Grand Canyon under the command of Lieutenant Joe Christmas Ives. That makes him the first geologist there 11 years before John Wesley Powell, even though everyone thinks Powell was the first. The Grand Canyon failed to impress the lieutenant, who wrote, "It looks like the gates of hell. The region is altogether valueless. Ours has been the first and will undoubtedly be the last party of whites to visit the locality." Clarence King was a geologist, not a soldier at all, yet at age 25, on the strength of sheer charisma, he was commissioned as an Army captain and invited to write his own orders for an expedition. His was the first Army expedition to include a photographer, perhaps seeking to correct the melodramatic, romanticized image of the Rockies that Easterners were getting from the painter Albert Bierstadt. Who had accompanied a previous Army expedition. King fumed, "What has Bierstadt done but twist and skew and distort and discolor and belittle and be pretty this whole doggone country? Why, his mountains are too tall and slim, they'd blow over." This painting actually played a huge role in what Americans thought of the Rocky Mountains. Bierstadt went on the expedition and then he got back home and he painted this really big painting from vague memories of the Rockies, putting a lot of things together, and then he sent it on a tour. It was a single painting exhibition tour, and people all over the East lined up and spent their 25 cents to see it. And then when the tour was done, he sold it to a rich man for $25,000, which was the greatest sum ever paid for a painting by an American painter up to that point. Another botanist, Carl Andreas Geyer, came west with Sir William Drummond Stewart's 1843 expedition, the first European pleasure trip to the Rockies. The party camped on Persian carpets under crimson canopies, and it included a painter. Stewart hired this painter to come along and then paint large paintings, and then when Stewart got back to Scotland, he built a hunting lodge in the style of the American West, he hoped, and adorned it with all of these large paintings of himself interacting with the indigenous people and with the buffalo, etc. Geyer, the botanist, left the party at the Big Sandy, right on the other side of the Wind Rivers, carrying on westward at first alone, but soon with Jesuit missionaries. That turned out to be a huge step downscale. The hospitality the Jesuits showed to me was scant and beggarly. From the Jesuit St. Ignatius mission to the Coeur d'Alene area was one of the most terrible journeys I've ever made, especially in the midst of winter crossing 76 times streams. Some we had to swim. Owing to the difficulties, I could not pay proper attention to the vegetation. But this much I do know, that I saw a coast redwood. He did not see a coast redwood in Idaho or Montana. Overall, he was usually a competent botanist, but he was short on charm and perhaps on ethics. He reneged on a contract to deliver his collections to botanist Georg Engelmann, who the spruce is named for. He overstayed his welcome at the Shimakain mission, where the missionary's wife wrote, "We're determined to be rid of him." And he left the regional boss of the Hudson's Bay Company scrambling to find out whose credit line would eventually pay for all the supplies Geyer was buying. Okay, here I'm going to excerpt heavily from a Wyoming scientist and science writer, Jeffrey Lockwood. He's at the University of Wyoming. And he got intensely interested in the history of the Rocky Mountain locust. In the summer of 1875, a swarm of Rocky Mountain locusts streamed overhead for 5 days, creating a living eclipse of the sun. It was a superorganism composed of 10 billion individuals, devouring as much vegetation as a massive herd of bison. A vast region of pioneer agriculture was decimated. U.S. troops were mobilized to distribute food, blankets, and clothing. By clocking the insects' speed as they streamed overhead and by exchanging telegrams with surrounding towns, the U.S. Signal Corps estimated that the swarm was 1,800 miles long and at least 110 miles wide. Those are all quotes from a great article in High Country News that Lockwood wrote. Locusts are simply grasshoppers when they flock in hordes numbering in the multi-millions. So it's no wonder, with all this westward pressure of these billions of locusts, that some of them ended up in the Wind River and Beartooth and Crazy Mountains, frozen into glaciers. There were 4 glaciers in those mountain ranges named either Grasshopper or Hopper Glacier. There probably aren't 4 anymore because a lot of glaciers have been turning into mere snow patches. But on at least one glacier, the carcasses were still identifiable as the species that had been the Great Plague of 1870 and was last seen alive in 1902. It remains the only documented extinction of a pest insect. Lockwood devoted years to figuring out how they went extinct. He concluded that during one phase of their life cycle, kind of like monarch butterflies depending on this small area of forests deep in Mexico, in one phase of their life cycle, they depended on a limited number of valleys, largely in Wyoming, which also looked like some of the best places for farming. By converting these valleys into farms, diverting streams for irrigation, allowing cattle and sheep to graze in riparian areas, and eliminating beavers and their dams, the pioneers unknowingly wiped out locust sanctuaries. They doomed the species. So, speaking of bodies preserved where they died on a glacier, here's Ötzi, the Bronze Age man who froze to death on a glacier in the Alps and was found 5,200 years later. He had 3 kinds of shelf fungi in his bag. He was probably using one of them, a species of red-bell conch, to treat his intestinal worms. We deduce that because it is one of dozens of mushrooms with specific medicinal uses that are well known to ethnobiologists, and because Ötzi's gut had whipworms. Many mushrooms have cholesterol-lowering, anti-cancer, antioxidant, antifungal, and antimicrobial properties that have been found in studies, and medicines from them are marketed in China, and one is officially approved in Japan, yet in North America they remain on the alternative medicine shelf. This seems odd when you recall that a fungus called penicillium practically invented Western pharmacology. Go figure. Since lichens live on air, dust, sunlight, and atmospheric moisture, they don't necessarily need to be rooted at all. In some wide open habitats, like Wyoming, you may find perfectly healthy lichens utterly on the loose. They range from fully vagrant species to mere accidents. When a specialized growth form does occur, like the one in this picture, the branches are balled up, a little like a tumbleweed, with the difference that tumbleweeds don't tumble until they're dead. A vagrant lichen's best hope of traveling far in the American West may lie in catching on a pronghorn's fur. Pronghorns enthusiastically eat tumbleweed rock shield, the one in the last picture. I think these pronghorns might disagree with the Wyoming agencies that blame the same lichen for mass poisonings of sheep and elk. A Persian village was once saved from wartime starvation when a windstorm covered it with vagrant lichens, which they recognized as edible and baked into a sort of bread. The same phenomenon is the most plausible explanation for, you guessed it, manna from heaven in the book of Genesis. Finally, I'm going to read one species account, which is longer and more in-depth, about a very charismatic species. It's from an unpublished book proposal. Few humans alive today will ever see a wolverine. They're so remote and so shy, it's no wonder they're only just beginning to take their rightful place among charismatic mesofauna. They scrupulously stay well away from roads, buildings, and even cross-country skiers. The majority of their historic interactions with humans lingered unhappily in memory for the humans. Trappers complain that they scavenge animals out of their traps, or sometimes break into their cabins, leaving behind them utter mayhem and a nauseating smell. At the same time, trappers love wolverines, the dead ones in their traps. Wolverine pets are valuable, perfect for lining parka hoods, and they're still trapped in Canada. The fur is long, thick, and hygrophobic. And the classic, far north parka has a collar of wolverine fur. A team of geographers from Montreal interviewed trappers for their views on wolverines and compiled their responses into a word cloud. As you can see, the word bad dominates, but tokens of respect surround it. For good reason. The wolverine is one supremely cool beast. Wolverines specialize in rugged terrain with deep snow, and unlike bears, they stay active all winter. Finding enough food to eat in the mountains in winter requires a vast home range. The paths they choose to get from A to B make mountaineers' jaws drop. A Glacier National Park male named M3, creative scientists there, was GPS tracked crossing the peak's highest summit, Mount Cleveland, in January snow by ascending a steep 4,900-foot face in 90 minutes. As you can tell, this is a Google Earth image based on Mount Cleveland in summer, so it doesn't have all the snow, but when the wolverine climbed it, it was all snow. If that makes a difference, it might be easier, who knows, for a wolverine. Biologists in the Selkirk Mountains found a 300-pound caribou brought down by a wolverine. Wolverines average 25 pounds. That must be close to the greatest size ratio a lone mammal predator can tackle. Caribou are a mainstay of wolverine diets in the Northwest Territories, either as carrion or as live prey. Wolverines love avalanche basins where they sniff out and dig out deer and mountain goat carcasses deep in the packed avalanche snow. Strong jaws and an oddly tilted pair of molars enable them to shred frozen meat and bone. In other areas or other times of year, snowshoe hares or marmots may be dietary staples. Wolverines weigh about as much as a medium-sized dog. That makes them the second biggest member of the weasel family, exceeded only by the Amazonian river otter. In shape and fur, they more resemble a small bear. Colloquially, they're called skunk bears, possibly because of their foul-smelling secretions, which repel other carnivores from their meat caches and may also help males and females locate each other, which is quite an issue for wolverines, as we'll soon see. Only with modern technology has it really become possible to study these elusive beasts in the wild. GPS-enabled radio collars, remote cameras, and DNA analysis of snagged hares have cast a bit of light on the subject at last. Years of observing a few individuals in Glacier National Park yielded the astonishing discovery that wolverines are, after all, lovable, at least to their researchers. They're not as solitary as was once thought. Young wolverines, no longer living in their childhood dens, were seen playing in the snow with their littermates and later joining up with their dad for a few days at a time. The word researchers use for time spent with dad is school. They were almost certainly extirpated from the lower 48 states by 1930. They were trapped for their fur and deliberately poisoned under the banner of predator control. After 1930, they expanded south from Canada without human assistance to reoccupy much of their former range. Single individuals dispersed as far south as Colorado, Lake Tahoe, Utah, and Michigan. Michigan, which uses wolverine as its state nickname and as a sports team mascot, went without a single actual wolverine in the wild for almost 200 years. Then in 2004, one wandered in and died 6 solitary years later. Full disclosure, I'm married to a wolverine, an alumna of the University of Michigan. Wolverines seem capable of migrating by leaps and bounds. A male named Buddy showed up in the Sierra Nevada, having loped there from the Tetons, from central Idaho. The male in Colorado, named M56, came from the Grand Tetons. These dispersals exceed 400 miles as the crow flies and considerably farther as the wolverine wanders. More critically, they cross freeways and vast desert steppes, features that wolverines are generally loath to venture across. However, these 400-mile emigrant males failed to expand the species range because they doomed themselves to celibacy. Males and females disperse alone, and females do not disperse as far, nor do they cross a typical habitat as boldly. It makes me wonder, someone's getting bored. It makes me wonder what these males were thinking of. Plausibly, since wolverine populations are almost always sparse in the extreme, it may be normal for them to set up a home range without first having a chance to verify the presence of the opposite sex. After spending several years in Colorado without finding any single wolverine females in that state, M56 bounded on over to the Black Hills of North Dakota and was the sole wolverine in that state until he met his end on a highway. Pitfalls notwithstanding, wolverines did gradually but surely expand their North American range southward for the past century, but we can't expect them to hold on to this hard-won territory. Extinction of the entire species is not imminent because wolverines encircle the Arctic Ocean on all 3 Arctic continents. But climate trends will almost inevitably reverse their recent expansion south of Canada. Why exactly? Well, how often have I said the word snow in this discussion? 7 times. Wolverines are confined to snowy regions, and those are shrinking. A particular measure of snow has been identified, snowpack depth in mid-May. That is roughly when wolverine kits demand the most milk from their mother. That demand in time and in calories keeps her from roaming her home range, finding food, so she prepares ahead of time before giving birth by burying meat to freeze in the snow near her den. Thus, she requires a home with a freezer, and she'll move as far north as she has to get it. 21st century climate predictions find that the portion of land in the lower 48 states that will have snowpack in mid-May will decrease by at least half and maybe up to 90%. Since such terrain is found only at the highest parts of the West mountain ranges, on a map it looks like a far-flung scattering of islands. Biologists have mapped out potential wolverine corridors connecting the islands. Every once in a while, a female might venture across one of the corridors while dispersing. The total population in the lower 48 is thought to be somewhere between 100 and 300. It's guesswork. If a population gets too small, it dies out due to inbreeding causing birth defects. According to the generally accepted formula, wolverine populations on the edges of the species range should have died out already. The Wyoming population is around 15, according to the Game and Fish Department. One was photographed. Oh, this one's in Glacier National Park. This one was just shot by some dude backpacking in the Wind River Range and posted on iNaturalist in 2024. Lucky guy. In 2022, a wilderness guide reported seeing at least a dozen wolverines at one time on a slope in the Tetons. Now, experienced wolverine biologists very likely doubt this, but one of them, fairly expert, saw photos of this sighting, of at least a few of the wolverines in this sighting, and thought it looked convincing, according to the Cowboy State Daily. So, you still might see one, or at least prints. Some of us here have seen prints in the Wind Rivers. So that's it, and I'm ready for the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mathews. Wonderful presentation. We're going to take questions for about half an hour. And I am not as athletic as the people who usually run these things, so I'm not going to bound all over this space handing you the microphone. You're going to line up right here. Those of you who want to ask questions, this is the normal method in most lecture halls. And the first person at the head of the line gets to ask a question, then the one after, and the one after, all right? So go for it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this works. We'll ask each questioner to state his or her name or names, and then keeping your mouth no more than 14 millimeters away from this thing to put your question to our esteemed lecturer.
Thank you for your lecture. My name is Nola Bertucci. I was wondering what your opinion is on like relocating animals or reintroducing or introducing them into their natural habitats or, unnatural habitats. For instance, the mountain goat situation in the Olympic Mountains.
You have something to say about the miking here? She says you can turn it back on. She doesn't have quite as much control over our lives as we thought.
Oh, that probably did it. Sorry.
Okay.
I had turned it around.
Next questioner.
Hello, my name is Catherine Alba. Thank you so much for your lecture. My question is if you could expand more on what you see as Wyoming's future. It seems like it had something to do with wind turbines, and kind of basically what do you see as Wyoming's future, I guess? And my second question is, what is your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Let's see. Well, one that I made in my experimenting days and that I've never actually seen for sale is marzipan with almond extract. And then you put a little hot fudge sauce on that. I also experimented once. I wanted to try an unsweetened avocado ice cream to serve a scoop on salad. And that was pretty good, but it did tend to turn brown really fast, so that was a problem to deal with. So I didn't quite hear every word of your science question.
I was wondering if you could expand more on what you see as Wyoming's future.
Oh.
Starting kind of like with the wind turbines. Yeah.
I think there will be more wind turbines.
You see that as a good thing or a bad thing?
And to me, it's a good thing, yeah. And the eagle mortality is an issue, but you should remember that so far, there are far more eagles killed by people shooting them, more by people poisoning them, more by them getting electrocuted on electric lines than by wind turbines. But if there are a lot more wind turbines, they could start catching up, so that's why we need to be careful about it. And also, of course, looking at birds as a whole, the number killed by flying into buildings is 1,000 times the number killed by wind turbines.
Thank you, Mr. Mathews. My name is Patrick Morgan.
Hi, Patrick.
Yes, nice to meet you. I have two questions. One is off of Nola's question, which is, what about like the insertion of wolves into Yellowstone National Park, or like mountain lions and other big animals, as opposed to trees? And then the second question is, like, what are your thoughts or opinions on the causes of the recession of snow in the glaciers in the Wind River Mountains?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, about the wolves. I like it. Yeah. I got to go and see wolves. And I think the science on, there's still controversy over how much, like the gung-ho pro-wolf people are saying that it saved aspens and saved willows and is bringing back, everything that was natural about Yellowstone in the past. And that's not all that clear, but it seems it's probably helping a little bit, but it's definitely exaggerated by some of the people on that side of things. And interestingly, it reduces the number of coyotes because they compete and sometimes kill coyotes. And that increases the number of foxes because coyotes sometimes compete or kill foxes. So interesting seeing all the effects. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. And the second question was cause of warming. Well, I pretty much read the whole standard explanation of mostly fossil fuels, some other things, land use change, methane, methane from permafrost, methane from agriculture, methane from gas well leaks and gas transmission leaks. Yeah, to me it all seems pretty well settled.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hello, my names are Trevor and Spears.
Hi, Trevor.
I also have two questions. My first one is, I was really interested by your explanation of what happened this winter, but I'm wondering if you know anything about how out west we had a very strange, dry and warm winter, but out east, from what I heard news from back home, it was a lot harsher than usual. So I'm wondering if you know anything about if there is something interrelated there or why that was the case.
No, I don't think, I've been trying to read a lot about that this spring, and no one really knows. I mean, it's weather. It's weather, it has vagaries. One kind of big thing that they've identified is that with warming, big things called loops in the jet stream tend to get stuck more often, and that has sometimes caused cold weather over eastern North America to stay for several weeks, or the reverse. Usually it's been cold in the east and west in the west coast that's gotten stuck. So that's a hypothesis. It looks pretty good, but I don't know. Second question?
And then my second question is just like, what is the coolest, rarest, most interesting bird you've seen? Maybe like out of range, weird, or just interesting.
I don't think I have a really great example. I do think it's kind of cool. In my first edition, I wrote that ravens are wilderness birds and avoid the cities, and they're changing. We see them in Portland pretty often. I probably see a raven for every 50 crows I see in Portland. So that's kind of out of range in one sense, but yeah, not really.
Interesting, thank you.
Hello, I am David Frank. I have no, I'm just kidding. One question for you. I've often encountered a situation where I'm finding myself in wonder about nature. Let's say the wind, and I'll express that wonder, and my 9-year-old cousin will then get into some sort of scientific explanation of how that actually works, and then I get kind of angry and want to smack him. So I'm curious, how has your delving into the actual mechanics of nature led you to wonder?
I think I gave a pretty good example about those damned foxes. Magnetic field superimposed on their vision field helps them spot a mouse under the snow. I mean, you know, I experience both kinds of wonder. I go out there and I see a view and, oh my God, could this be any better? This is so amazing. And then I also read scientific papers and think, oh my God, this is so amazing. So I don't think there's a conflict.
Hello, my name is Grace Kleinfelter, and my question to you is in the realm of wildlife conservation, and in the fact that we're all liberally educated and we don't really have a scientific background. But how can we, as lovers of nature, really try our hardest to keep wildlife alive? And what would your recommendation be in that for wildlife conservation for the younger generation?
That's tough, but you need to talk up your beliefs for what's needed. You need to talk it up as much as possible, and with people you know, and even with strangers sometimes, and hopefully that will have an effect on the political sphere slowly. If you hate politics and don't want to talk about anything like that, you know, there are careers in wildlife conservation, unless certain administrations manage to fire them all.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Allison Wolka. I was just wondering, what's the most beautiful place that you've ever backpacked in or camped in, and what would be your suggestion to us as avid outdoorsmen to where should we go?
Oh, I categorically refuse to answer that question. It's like, well, I understand. It's so amazing what this school does. This school is going to give you a big dose of the Wind River Range, assuming you're a student. Yes. So, I mean, the Wind River Range is fantastic, but you probably want to also go some other places. I guess I can rave about Glacier National Park in the general way, without naming any place specific. And the same goes for the North Cascades and the Olympics in Washington. But, oh, and this isn't a wilderness, this isn't a backpacking place particularly, but for car camping, I was flabbergasted by the north rim of Black Canyon of the Gunnison. I could step out of my tent and walk 100 yards and to a railing, and then hundreds of yards straight down and all the rocks. You know, I showed a picture of migmatite during the slideshow, and all the rocks are these enormous migmatites with swirls of black and white. Very cool.
I can't believe you actually gave me this microphone. Thank you very much for your lecture. My name is Liam Carnival Jones Fedorov. I have a quick question for you. Have you ever seen the movie Jurassic Park?
No.
Okay. So are you aware of the theory that we can use the DNA of animals long frozen in glaciers to sort of bring them back from extinction? You know, like woolly mammoths and things like that?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you think we should do that? Like, should we bring back woolly mammoths or Tasmanian tigers or dodo birds or other things that have gone extinct recently?
Just as a gut response, it just really seems like a waste of time and money to me. And it's not going to really accomplish anything ecologically. It's not something I've ever read or studied about, but that's my feeling, yeah.
Is there an extinct animal you'd like at least want to see brought back, just to like see it in your lifetime?
I'm sorry?
Is there an extinct animal you'd like to see brought back in your lifetime? Like something you find really cool? Because like I would love to see a dodo bird. I think that'd just be hilarious.
Nope.
Fair enough.
Hello, thank you for your lecture. My name is Maria Mira Nicole Emberloz in Serafika Grenier.
Slower and louder?
Maria. I just had to compete with Liam. Anyway, sorry. My question is, like you said, you got an English major, and then you built a cabin in the woods, and then you started an ice cream shop, and then you worked in a restaurant, and then you were writing a field guide. But, like, how did your love for nature come about, and what was your relationship with it? Was it, like, as a backpacker or a naturalist, or was it, like, I don't know, a spiritual thing? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I feel that it's spiritual, but I don't know if I would have said that at the time. And I did have relatives teaching me plants on the trail side from when I was little. My grandfather was a horticulture scientist. My dad majored in horticulture and then switched. His sister was the one who taught me plants on the trail side. I did a fair amount of hiking when I could, and then backpacking, so I just always loved it. No more particular explanation than that.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Michael. I grew up going to national parks with my family, and even just over the course of my life have seen that a lot of popular national parks now require reservations for entry and are just kind of slammed with so many people entering them. Kind of against that is contrasted these vast swaths of wilderness like the Wind River Range that require a lot of skill, time, some money to explore and kind of appreciate. So I wanted to ask what you think the American model for wilderness management should be. Should we try to make it as accessible as possible, or just keep it as wild as we can and thus inherently require some level of commitment for access?
Yeah, I think both. I think we need to keep some areas quite wild. We need to keep quotas for some areas. And, you know, I think about the Alps. There's no nationality on earth that hikes more than the Swiss. They have a lot of trails in the Alps. They're on them. They don't drive an RV to the Alps to go hiking. They take a train or a bus. So I think with a combination of mass transit and just taking kind of a different approach to how we vacation, we could get more people into some of the areas without them seeming horrendously overcrowded. In the immediate level advice about what you should do next year, you know, if you really hate crowds, just go to the effort of finding areas that are not so discovered yet. And they may not be quite as gaga spectacular, but having fewer people will make up for it.
Thank you very much for your lecture. My name is Quinn Lynch, and I was wondering what you see the scope and breadth of human intervention in natural ecosystems being, and whether or not that changes what wilderness is in changing how we interact with those natural spaces.
There's kind of no stopping it, human interference in wilderness. And as you probably have read, there's been a countercurrent amongst in the conservationist community where they kind of, a lot of people are saying the whole protect wilderness idea of the 1960s was kind of a mistake. It ignores the fact that indigenous people were in the what we call wilderness and changing it and managing it in some ways forever. So they don't even like talking about this pristine wilderness that has no effects of humans. And of course, changing climate is a human effect, which is going to affect all the wildernesses. So I don't know, it's just have to muddle through, but I do appreciate a degree of wilderness protection, for sure. Did that answer the question?
More or less.
If you want to push it harder, I could try.
I think maybe I'll talk to you after the lecture.
Okay.
We have time for a couple more questions. First up is the redoubtable Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Dr. Grove. As said, my name is Ben Collins. Thank you for your lecture. I was really interested that you pursued English first, and we seniors have been reading William Faulkner just now. And I'm curious how much of a role literature should play in reinstilling a love for nature, and how much we should pursue the more scientific method. I think it's also super cool that foxes have magnetic abilities. And so, yeah, I don't know what's the balance. Should we encourage people to read a lot of literature about nature and our relation to it, or should it mainly be scientific?
I don't know if I can answer that. It's just whatever works for you. Different people are going to have different paths. Sorry, I can't do better than that.
Hello. Thank you for your lecture. My name is Florian. I would actually just like to ask you whether you could tell me about forest fires and their importance, or whether they're not important, and maybe, I don't know, give a little history. I know almost nothing about it, but I would like to learn more.
Buy the orange and black one called Trees in Trouble. Forest fires are, there's been a lot of oversimplification I see no end of preaching in the media about how forest fires are natural and they do good to the forest and they're necessary, blah, 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 blah. And that's especially true of ponderosa pine forests and the associated ones that have a lot of, or could have a lot of ponderosa pine, or giant sequoia forests for sure are that way. Some other kinds of forests are different. They're likely, like spruce fir subalpine forests are likely to be mostly killed when a forest fire comes through. Also, there's been a change in style of forest fires because forest fires were kept out of those ponderosa pine forests for the most part for 100 years or more. And you know, this is what you read in these media accounts about how they got too dense, and this means the forests will be more severe. And that's basically true, but only for those select types of forests. They're called the frequent low severity forest type, epitomized by ponderosa pine and giant sequoia. So I strongly believe that prescribed fire can help, especially in those forest types, and that a lot of fires, a lot of parts of fires do leave the forest better off, and then a lot of others don't. A lot of, especially with it warming, there are high severity fires, especially toward the south of the Rockies, which will not be forest again in your lifetime. And to a degree, at the southern edge of the range of natural range of a species, that's kind of inevitable. If the climate gets warmer, then places that could support trees in the past may not in the future. And fire will be the agent that flips the switch. But then there are other places where a fire can do some good, or where a program of thinning, even mechanical thinning, and followed by prescribed fire, could save forests for quite a while. So it has to be done with a lot of science and study to do it right.
All right, we'll take one more question. Unless that's the dean, we'll take two more questions.
Thank you for your lecture, Mr. Mathews. I was wondering, how your study of nature has affected your relationship with God.
I'm a nature worshiper. I feel like nature and God are almost the same thing. And I know most of you are probably different from that, but that's the way I am. That's fine. And obviously there's this enormous history of Christians who have looked at nature and seen God and seen the works of God, and I honor and respect that tradition.
Thank you for your lecture. My name is Scott Olson. So I'm wondering
the dean?
I happen to be the dean, yes. By training, I'm a scientist, so I love everything you said. Thank you. I wonder if you could just comment on the problem that the non-specialist has, which is, as you've mentioned, I think, most of the information that gets to us about these things is filtered, overly simplified. It's, the sexy things are highlighted, and the more difficult technical things are hidden away. On the other hand, if we go to the actual literature, it tends to be extremely technical and maybe inaccessible. So I wonder if you could just say something about how the layperson, maybe resources that lay people, non-specialists could use to gain better access. You could make a plug for education here, I don't know. Anything else you could say to that? Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. college is good. There are books for general readers out there that do a great job. I can't think of them, name them off the top of my head at the moment. Wait. Yeah, there's my book. But yeah, let's see. I'm sorry, it's just not where my head's at right now to name them. But you've got the internet. You can find them.
All right, let's give it up for Mr. Mathews one more time. Unless our lecturer is about to make a beeline for his hotel room, you can snag him in the room next door where we'll have a bit of a reception and continue your questions in a more informal format if you like. So, thank you very much. I guess I need hardly point out, but I will point out that there are books by our esteemed lecturer for sale on the back table there. I don't know if he's going to sign them for you, but if you twist his arm, he might. And if you need help with the twisting, I'm available.